your way of seeing things is stupid. Today on the Manspace. Welcome to the Manspace podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter. Bienvenidos, Spacemenios.
Started to sound dirty.
Dude. I was talking with some clients today we were talking about their sex life, and I kind of paused in the middle. I was like, "Did you guys ever pause and just think about how weird sex is? Honestly, like kissing in and of itself, it's like, let me put." Stuart it's a quote from some like meme or Vine or movie where he's always like, "Kiss me on my hot mouth." It's always like, ugh. But it feels like if you think about like the whole process of like any sort of physical intimacy is like, this is kind of weird if you just pause and think about it for a second. Like, so it's probably best to not pause and think about like, ew, what are we doing? Oh, good times. Well, should we just kind of...
Somebody's going to be like, thanks a lot for ruining sex for me, Rob.
Maybe I told you guys this before, but sometimes I like to mess with clients when they'll be like going on a romantic getaway and I'll be like, "Oh, think about me the next time you're having sex." And they're like, "Nah." I'm like, "Now you will though, because I said it." And they'll be like, "Ah, dang it."
Did I ever tell you about my friend's like middle school, early high school solution for when you can't get a girl off your mind?
No.
He's like someone would be like, "Oh, I just can't stop thinking about whoever." Picture her taking a dump.
That's my new therapeutic technique. I'm going to make a whole theory of therapy based around that. Anyway, that's all, because we don't have a ton of time. So I'd like to go on forever about how, because Matt, you weren't there for the episode that posted today, but I did talk about it.
Yeah, what'd you guys do?
I kind of ranted a little bit about how it was kind of an extension of the one I'd done previously by myself, where I was saying, "Hey, look, women, you need to take some accountability in this." And I went off and I was like, "Men are doing better than we think we are. Come on, stop making everything about men." And you need to kind of look at what you're doing. And it was a little more balanced. Mike balanced it out. He kept me from just being like, "Women suck." Hey, dude. So here's another side note. Just 2 nights ago, Becky and I discovered the TV show AP Bio. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
I've seen the cover thing, but yeah, is it good?
Is that the one on?
It's on Netflix, right?
It's on Netflix now. No, it was on. I think it was on like NBC.
It used to be on like
or
ABC,
something.
right?
Yeah. Some major
I saw
network.
a few episodes of it at the beginning.
Dude, I think it was like episode 2 or 3. I was laughing. We were both laughing so hard we had to stop the show. There's a scene where like they're trying to break into this computer, the kids are, and this kid's like, "Well, if the teacher comes, I'll play Baker Street on my saxophone." And I can't. It's a song you'd recognize. I can't. But anyway, as soon as she comes in, she's like walking and he starts doing like, burr, 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 burr. It's not that one, but he starts playing it and she's like, "What the whole thing was like played out so hilariously that anyway, why was I telling you this? I don't remember anymore. Something about, dang it.
Have you guys watched?
Huh?
Have you watched High Potential?
No, not yet.
It's good.
A movie or show?
TV show.
Show. It's with
What did I tell you
Caitlin
about
Olsen.
that show? What were we talking about 2 seconds ago?
You said we got to hurry. Oh, no, you were saying you were here. What you guys talked about last week.
Yeah, last week's topic.
Yeah. Oh, it was this.
And women.
So in this show, Patton Oswalt is the principal, and he's kind of he's Patton Oswalt. He's like a goofy, lovable, but pathetic loser kind of thing. And he really wants to be good friends with the main character, who is Dennis from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who's a Harvard educated PhD in philosophy. But Patton Oswalt's wife kicks him out, who's actually Angela from The Office. She kicks him out of the house for something. And so Patton's staying with Dennis in his house. And Dennis is eventually like, "I can't stand this. Let's get your marriage back on track." So he goes and does like some marriage therapy basically. And then at some point, it's going well enough. And then at some point, Angela, she's like, my back hurts. And he's like, oh, well, why don't you, Dennis is like, why don't you sit in my chair? It's got all these pads in it. And she's like, well, no, because now you're sitting in that chair. And then I feel bad that I made you get out of that chair. And he's like, okay. And she's like, oh, my back hurts. Why did, then she starts getting like mad at her husband. Like, why didn't you think about this? And he's like, well, just take the cushions. And she's like, no, because then I'd feel bad. You know, I'd feel bad. And so it's this place where it's like, and he then the next scene is him sitting with Patton with a drinking a beer, being like, dude, you got to leave her. She is crazy. Anyway, that's what I thought of that episode. Because it also, something happened in one of my offices in my session today where somebody said something about the husband and his stupid haircut or something. I was like, now just imagine saying that the husband to the wife and how poorly that would go. And it's like, yeah, why is there that double standard? So anyway, Matt, that's a long way of saying that's what we talked about last time. That people are probably like, Rob, we get it, dude. You don't like women. That's not true. I do. And most of the time I think men need to change. All right. Here's today's episode that I'm going to pick your guys' brain on. Mike,
Rob,
you'll remember this, that I just brought it up like 5 minutes ago. But I feel like, and I might remember this wrong, but I don't, it was like a few years ago that I kind of felt annoyed. Maybe it's because my kids are always like, why is it so hot here at Christmas? I'm like, you guys, It's hot in a lot of places at Christmas. Like it's only actually cold, like really cold. Movies. And snowy in like a certain few areas and in the movies. And basically the idea of like a white Christmas, apparently I was reading something that really comes from like a Dickens book or something.
Yeah. It's a Christmas Carol. Like that was.
Yeah. That was like, whatever it was like, that was not really a thing until it was because when he wrote this, London had multiple like white Christmases in a row. Because of some weird weather pattern. But other than that, it was like never snowing on Christmas.
Right?
London's not a typically snowy place.
Right. Mm-hmm. But because it happened in that time, then everyone's like, oh, Christmas should be snowy. And then I thought about, this is what I brought up to you. This was with you and Jenner and Becky, but it was like, well, why do we do that? Isn't that kind of like there's only actually a certain portion of the population of the globe that actually even has any expectation of a white Christmas, not even like even the possibility, because there's the whole southern half of the globe that actually their Christmas is in summer. And so I was telling Becky about this, is like, do you think Australians watch our movies and they're like, oh, I wish it was cozy and snowy out? And she's like, I wish there was a way we could know. And I was like, well, Austin Smith is on his mission there right now. So Becky texted Tanny, his mom, and Tanny was actually on a FaceTime call with him at the time. And so he's like, no, he's like, every once in a while you'll see somebody who likes to do some sort of white Christmas thing. He's like, but most of the time they really like their beach vibe Christmas. Like it's all beach vibe because it's summer. And so they're super into beach vibe. And I don't know. I mean, I was in the Philippines for 2 years, which is pretty equatorial. And there was obviously no expectation of white Christmas for any of them. But it makes people feel like, well, this isn't right. I don't like, it feels like, but it's supposed to be that way. So here's what I'm wondering, because I think this comes from the idea too, that no matter, like as Americans, if you guys have ever watched those like, what is not the Home Shopping Network, HGTV shows where they go like they're buying a house, or renting a place in Brussels. And they're always walking in and be like, it's so small. Or it'll be like, why is the washing machine in the kitchen? It's like, well, that's how they do it. Or it's like, there's no closets. It's always like, you're not in America. Like, stop walking in and saying, why isn't this America? And it always makes me feel a little embarrassed. But there's this idea that we have these blinders on that, like, all I know is my existence. But then with Americans, it's a little bit more. And I don't know if this is fair to say, but with Americans, it's like, all I know is my existence, and it's the right existence and the best existence that everybody actually wants. And anybody who doesn't have this, they're just idiots. They're lying to you. Even though we've talked about this before, like in Sweden, they have consistently higher test scores for their youth and consistently higher happiness scores for their general population. But that doesn't match because in our world, you should go to work for as many hours as you can, because that means you have a good work principle, even though Sweden has among the lower, they work like 34 hours per week or something on average. And they actually only go to school. I was watching this thing. It's like they go to school for like 4 to 6 hours or something. It's like 4 hours, and they never have homework because they believe that you should go home and not be at school. But our way of thinking is that's wrong. And not only is it wrong, it's probably like it's almost offensive or stupid that you would think that way. And maybe even ungodlike. Like our way is God's chosen way. So what I'm curious about is taking that idea. How do you see that? Because my wife was mentioning this. She's like, I think that plays out in relationships. So how do you see that idea, if that makes sense? The idea that like I have blinders on and I only see what I sometimes want to see, or my way is the right way. How do you see that playing out in relationships? A go.
Michael.
Did you call him Michael?
Yes, I
That's
did.
You are my number one. That's what he sounds
I
like.
was just thinking, though, when you keep talking about blind spots and blind, can we see? And I can't remember what show it was, but someone said, like, even a blind man can see, blah, blah. And he's like, well, technically, a blind man can't see anything.
I feel like that was Psych. I feel like I just saw that episode.
That might be.
Anyway.
I'm trying to think of how I see it.
Like maybe you can even say, no, I agree. Christmas should be white.
Well, I mean, Christmas should be white. I had this conversation. I was talking to somebody. Really rambly.
It's great for our listeners.
Right. I feel like I've noticed
I did it
lately
like 7
that
times already.
often as we're interacting with somebody and we're trying to get them to understand our point of view, really what we're seeking is for them to think like we think. And the fact that they may simply not agree with us doesn't really ever enter our thought process. There is no world that exists where if I explain myself well enough, you won't agree with me.
Because it's either my way or your way, right? If it's not mine, I have to go your way.
Right. And if we break it down to simple things like somebody's love of peanut butter, then I think, yeah, we can see the ridiculousness of that thought process. It would be ridiculous for me to think that everyone would love peanut butter. No, some people just aren't going to like texture, flavor, whatever.
They're wrong.
Right. Sure. But when we move into larger areas, we can't comprehend that idea. Like the idea of confrontation has been on my mind a lot lately. And just like a lot of it comes from, well, clearly I'm not explaining myself well enough, because if I was, you would understand and therefore agree with me. And this thought, like I asked a client the other day, I said, so what happens if they just don't agree with you? Like, are you actually comfortable with that idea? Are you comfortable with the fact that you're going to go and you're going to explain this thing that to you is very important, and they're going to sit there and say, yeah, no, I think you're wrong. Like, are you going to be okay with that? And so I don't know that I can think of like really concrete examples of how it plays out, except I feel like that's the pattern you're describing. Like to me, that's what I guess that's how I see it.
Like
I see it in terms of, we can't imagine having a conversation with somebody on a topic that we feel strongly about and not buying into this idea of, but if I just explain myself well enough or eloquently enough or whatever, they will understand how I think and agree with me. Now, lots of people, like you and I had this conversation when I was down, Rob, like, I'm not looking for you to agree. I was just looking for understanding. And I had to reflect on that conversation for quite a bit to be like, was that true? Like that's what I was saying, and I believed it on a surface level.
Yeah, me too.
I believed I just really needed to feel like you understood, not that you agreed with me. But I had to spend time reflecting on it to say, is that really true? Or was I on some level waiting to hear him say, yeah, Mike, you're right. This is, and I still think, no, I really feel like, anyway. So that's
It's
my
gonna
rambling
continue
answer.
it.
I think that's how it plays out.
Okay. Yes, Matt, it's on.
Did it make any noise?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yes.
Like this?
Matt's doing ASMR.
You can't tell me that's just not
He's
soothing.
doing Mike's ASMR.
My answer today.
Oh man. So does it happen in relationships was your question?
Yeah, or how do you? I mean, I know it does. How
Yeah.
do you see it? Because go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think that I guess the essence of what you're talking about, right, is maybe to tie it into snow and summer vibes. I think we all have like an emotional temperature that's comfortable, and ideas and preferences and expectations kind of cluster around that, and then I think we try and gather people to our temperature, and it's like maybe we're not even, like you're saying, maybe I'm not even aware that that's what's happening because I'm up in like the idea space or the thinking about the particulars of what we're talking about, which, like, I'm sure we've talked about before, and we all see when we're doing couples therapy, people oftentimes get stuck at that level of conversation, and then it never comes together because it does feel like some sort of power struggle where I'm trying to win you over to my side or convince you that your side is wrong. But really what I'm trying to say is I want to connect with you, and my temperature is this and yours is this on this particular issue. And I don't know how to tolerate going up a few degrees or going down a few degrees. Mm-hmm. And like, it doesn't feel comfortable to me. So it becomes like all these appeals to authority almost, right? Like everybody knows this, or, most couples, or this is healthy or this is unhealthy, or, like all these. But really, I think it would be much more freeing if we were just able to say, this is what feels right to me. And have that be, like you're saying, Mike, just understood. Okay, cool. Like it's good to know you on that level. And if I let go of any desire to change your temperature, or adjust mine down or up to yours, I think the irony is the real connection only occurs when you're able to just reveal your temperatures. You don't even have to be like, I think we have to have similarities or agreement, or that's why I hate the freaking, like, the dyadic adjustment scale that we've talked about a million times on here. It's like the scale that's used in most research to see how happy couples are, but really it's just like, how much do you agree? I'm like, right. Well, that's pretty crappy. Like probably 2/3 of your relationship is going to be some form of disagreement. And so what's it like just to say, you can be yourself, and whatever it is that you prefer, whatever ideas you have, they're yours for a reason. And, but I think, again, identity and ego and probably a bit of like relationship panic goes into those conversations when we try and pull people over to our side, or yeah.
Well, I like this. Because like what you were describing, I've often thought about as priorities. Like, someone feels really strongly about something and someone doesn't. And I think, right, the priority level is just the same. But I like the idea more of this, like, this comfort level or like temperature range. Like, nope, this is just one of those things that I'm going to be hotter about, and this is one of the things I'm going to be cooler about, and it's fine. Like, if we all felt strongly about the same things, then there would be large chunks of things of progress that never happen, because none of us feel strongly about it. So we just kind of sit and wallow in mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
But because someone feels strongly about it, no, it gets pushed into a different range, which, you know, helpful, hurtful, depending on how you're looking at it. But that, I don't know. I like that idea more than priorities. Priorities feels too much like a judgment statement. Like that was, to me, as you were talking, I thought, yeah, the trick is not just to accept that we don't agree, but it's to remove judgment from it. To say that it's not as right, like that this thing isn't, that you don't prioritize it as much, or it doesn't, you know, like we don't have the same temperature on it. If you're really going to be accepting of it, you have to remove judgment from it. It can't be like somehow because you think that way you're better than I am, or because you don't think that way you're, you know, I'm better than you are. Like, no, that can't exist if you're going to have the honesty of the relationship stay intact. Yeah.
I actually think in some ways because this is like, when I think about it, I think about what I get frustrated about, that I know I do, and I don't know all the ways I do it. Like small little things. Like an example is, like, honestly, anytime I'm anywhere and I hear country music, I genuinely think this is just a big steaming turd. Like, this is terrible.
The place or the music you're listening
Music.
to?
I can't I have such a distaste for country music pretty much across the board. And I think it's genuinely bad. But most people actually disagree with me. And I can see that, like, sometimes the way I approach that is like, I won't just say, country music isn't for me. I will say it's a giant steaming turd. And then the other person's like, geez, guy, you know, like,
Now I have to defend it because you just
because I took such a hard stance on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that, like, I can recognize that the music I listen to, most people don't like it. But there's a part of me that's like, but if you could really listen to it, you'd find out this is superior. Just like what Americans do. It's like, yeah, I understand we all do things differently. I mean, ours is the better way. And so I think, Mike, I think you're right with this idea of removing judgment relationally. It's not only, I think you have to go one step further. That's the first step, is to say, how do I remove judgment so that I'm open to this? But the second part is being open to the possibility, hey, I might actually like this more. Like, what if I could hear this in a context of that's saying, I know it's outside my temperature, my emotional temperature. Because that's, Matt, some of the ways you said that, I think, some of that's a familiarity thing. When I watch couples, this happens often where it's like, well, he is making this effort. Can you see that he's making effort? And I'll have to point out what he's doing. It's like, okay, yeah, but, and then it's always this but, because they're looking for something specific. Yeah, but I mean, it's a bedroom, so it should have a closet. Well, no, they just put a dresser thing in there. That's where they keep all their stuff. A wardrobe.
They have way less stuff than we do.
Yeah, that too.
Which is smart.
Now, and I can also see that. Well, this is partly that. I think I told you guys about the conversation I had with somebody about how switching over to electric vehicles is just moving from one problem to a different problem. Like, we're still digging something out of the earth. We're still going to have to, you know, like, we didn't solve anything. Like, yeah. And I said, they're like, what do you propose? It's like, well, we can't do what I propose. We have to shrink our cities, like compact people in, have, you know, more of those, and then do like trains and mass transit. And they're like, oh, so like Europe, like we want to be that. And I was like, yeah. Why is that bad? You say it like it's the worst thing ever. Like on Clue, she was a socialist.
So we can't all be perfect.
So, like, I think in this context, it's like, it's in relationships, it's saying, oh, wait, maybe I can see that what you're doing actually might be better than what I'm doing. It's just what I'm doing is familiarity. Like when you say emotional temperature, Matt, part of what I thought was a familiarity. Like, this feels familiar to me. Mm-hmm. So if I'm used to living in New England every year at Christmas, then that feeling of like cold weather and hot cocoa and blah, 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 it's going to feel like Christmas. But if I then move down to Brazil and it's Christmas, it's going to feel like, I mean, I'm hot. This isn't. And so then we feel uncomfortable and we just want to feel that sense of like, okay, I know this place. And I think that happens in relationships where it's like, do it this way because I know that feels in the past over and over. Even if I only had one white Christmas out of my whole life, it felt that's the feeling I want all the time. And so I need you to talk to me this way because that's my emotional temperature instead of saying I can adjust mine. And actually there might be a lot of value in figuring out how to adjust it and say, I'm cooler with 72 now than I thought I was before.
Rewinding to electric vehicles.
Yes, please. Let's veer
This
off.
is going to be a very unpopular Manspace statement, and maybe more to come later on this. But
That's on board.
if you skip meat and cheese for one day with your family, that's the equivalent of taking your car off the road for 5 weeks.
What?
So,
Because
anyway.
of cows.
Well, just everything that goes into like
Process.
methane.
animal product
Yeah.
production.
You're talking carbon footprint wise.
Carbon footprint wise.
So if I go meat and cheeseless for one day, that's me not driving for 5 weeks.
Yeah, and I'm on a week and a half.
Whoa. You haven't had any
Meat
meat or
and
cheese?
cheeseless for a week and a half.
I probably had a little bit of cheese, but
Are you doing like protein shakes? How are you getting your protein in, guy?
Yeah, dude.
this has got to be a whole other episode because there's a lot about that. But basically, like, yeah. Anyway,
Oh, man.
Okay.
I'm not trying to convince you guys over to my side.
No,
Have you lost a crap ton of weight?
No, I mean maybe like 4-ish pounds, but that's
Well, this
that's
is
because I think I'm just probably eating a little bit less too. But yeah,
It's interesting.
Do you feel better though?
probably not like markedly yet. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I will. I'm trying this out because, long story short, like, and maybe this is a good example of being, like the art of persuasion rather than what we're talking about, where it's like, I'm going to demand I'm right and try and like arm wrestle you to my side. It's funny. I think a lot of people, especially even in relationships, it's like you have really good information and you have really good views and like everything about your position on it is actually pretty solid, but your soft skills of like getting somebody to feel it the way that you feel it they're horrible, right?
Mhm,
It's
yeah.
like they just become like really blunt objects that you like beat the other person over the head with. And so
cram the idea down their throat.
yeah. But so I watched this really boring documentary, meaning it was just a guy like sitting and talking and some like shots of other things. But it was about the Baskin and Robbins
The
son
health thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I read that book, but then I'm reading another one right now. But for me personally, there are some specific like kind of like I would just call them like spiritual nudges that are like, hey buddy, you should try something different. Like in like this specific direction. So but yeah, the way he talks about it in his book isn't like you're a horrible person if you eat meat or you're destroying the planet if you eat meat. Or it's like, you know, do whatever you want to with this information, but I'm just going to give you a really thorough view into everything we know about eating animal products, basically. And so it was really compelling on a number of different fronts, but I don't know, like, I'm just going to see how it goes. And
Sure.
I'm not going to not eat meat. I'm just going to like, just do it
Just
way
changing
less
things
regularly. The honestly, one of the biggest realizations I've had is like, holy crap, this is like dirt cheap. Like so much cheaper to eat this way. So that's been kind of cool. But
Well, I think what's interesting, Mike, and it's a blind spot kind of thing. That's like, there's nothing bad in it, but the questions you asked, I was like, well, that's interesting. Because are you losing a bunch of weight, right? There's the implication that like, well, if you cut meat out, you're going to lose weight. It's like, well, actually, no. Meat's
No,
not
it's actually the
necessarily high
cheese, not
calorie.
It wasn't the meat.
Sure.
It was the cheese.
Mhm.
Yeah, but people will assume that, or they'll think you're going to have more energy just eating vegetables. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
just because he cuts meat out doesn't mean he's just eating vegetables, right? Now,
Right.
because I've known, and I'm not saying that's nothing against you. I thought, well, that's an example of those kind of
Right,
subtle
but it is
blind
an
spots that
example
we
of
don't know.
Here's
Yeah, this
this
is what
thing
I've
that
known.
we've been taught.
These are the
Yeah,
reasons you
like-
eat differently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
like
why
I've
you
had-
would make those. Because why else would you make those changes?
Right.
Yeah.
Like I've
Yeah.
had a client who came in once who was, I think for sure a vegetarian. I don't know if they're a vegan. But I was always like, are you sure? You're really overweight. And I remember thinking, I guess I don't really
Are you
understand.
sure you are eating that way, or are
Yeah,
you
like
sure you're
that's
going to
what-
do it?
No, I was like, are you sure you're actually vegetarian or vegan? Because I don't know how you have so much weight on you, which
Mhm.
clearly was a space where it's like, oh, clearly I only think it's possible this way.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Instead of seeing, because then I found out that that their particular like kryptonite was they would eat chips and salsa like every night,
Mm.
like just pound it. And it's like, oh, it's still a matter of calories in,
Yeah.
calories
Right.
out. Now, if you're eating tons of vegetables, like we've talked about this with our kids, like you can feel stuffed eating like 1-2 cups of like
Right.
cauliflower and broccoli, and that is literally 57 calories. 2 cups of that
Yeah.
is 57 calories, and you can feel like you're going to throw up because
Yeah.
you ate so much.
Or like celery, which is
yeah,
like almost negative calories.
yes. Although I recently learned there is
I
no
heard
negative
that's not-
calorie food.
Yeah, I know.
Like there's no food that takes so much work to break down that it's
Right.
But it's
that
very,
it's
very
negative.
low calorie. One stick
is
is
like-
is 10 calories.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm
Well,
done.
no,
I'm going to rant off about vegetables now.
Like going back to this idea of, because I do think it's important to be open to it. The thing that was interesting to me in your example, right, with the country music was,
Yeah.
like I might listen to it and find that I actually like it, and I think, right, but you also might not. Like,
Right.
I once upon a time was very similar to you in terms of country music, and like, oh my gosh, it's crap, it's terrible, like I can't stand it. What are we doing? I've had some phases, like I actually owned a Garth Brooks tape album back in the day.
It's called
When
When
cassette,
he used to
Mike.
smash acoustic guitars.
Yes. And so like I think, yeah, no, like it was okay, and I can hear it, and I think, yeah, I get it. I get the appeal. I can hear the musicality of it. I can hear like Willie Nelson. If you guys have ever, like, that dude's voice is so smooth, it's ridiculous.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you can get past the weird nasally part of it. But yeah.
Sure, maybe, but still, get past it. That guy's voice is smooth. Anyway, listening to it, I think, yeah, but at the end of the day, I don't ever crave country music, ever.
Right.
And if it's on, my first instinct, like every once in a while, I'll climb in the car and like Allie will have it on, and I'm like, oh, why?
Mhm.
Right.
That's still my first instinct. Can I see things about it? Yeah, but it's not my cup of, like, it's just
Right.
not my thing.
Right.
And I think, yeah, it's okay. Like, I've exposed myself to it. I've, at one point I even owned some country music, and it's still just not my thing. So, okay, we're going to be different
Yeah.
about that. Like,
Isn't it weird,
I still
though?
hear
Go
what?
ahead. Well, it's weird how, like, the most obvious statement about an experience like that is like the least likely to come out of our mouths in a time like that, right? Because it sounds robotic and weird to just sit down and go, I don't prefer country music.
Yeah.
But that's really what's happening, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and internally, like the reaction we have, right, is also like I dislike this, therefore I can't tolerate it for 2 seconds.
Right. It's
Therefore,
bad.
I have to
and it's the
explode
worst
about
thing
it,
ever.
make
Yeah.
everybody feel bad about liking. Like,
Yeah.
it's weird how reactive we get internally to just something that, like you're saying, it's almost like I don't know what the judgment equivalent of this would be, but sitting down and not preferring something, right, or disliking something should be like an extremely common experience for us.
Right.
But maybe we've like curated our worlds in such a way that we don't have to experience it that much, and then when we do, it's like, why is this here? And it's like, because there's other people in the world. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but yeah, we have this big reaction to it. But I do think sometimes when people are like, yeah, it's just not my thing, then the reverse happens on the other side, right? You're saying, Rob, where it's like, well, why not? It's here. Let me show you something that you probably will like. Because,
you'll
like I
this.
remember Lisa hates fish. And so many times people are like, well, have you tried this? It's not real fishy. She's like, well, then what's the point? Like, don't you eat fish because it's fishy? Like, because you want to taste fish? Like, why? If something's not fishy, then why don't I just eat chicken or something? Like,
well, like the thing I always hear with fish is, well, you just haven't had it prepared right. I don't know. I've had it prepared by some pretty good cooks.
Yeah.
It's
just
not
something
my
you don't
thing.
like. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just like I don't love the texture of it. I don't love even the subtle hint of the flavor. I don't love
but that's what
I'm good.
But it's funny because with something like that, it's like, it is funny. Like, how come we can't just say, oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets much harder when it's relational because we tie, and even political, because we tie our hopes and dreams and our very future into whatever this thing is. So it's like, no, if someone's like, I don't know, sex has never really been like, yeah, it's fine, but I don't love it. And it's like, you have to. That's the only way to have a good marriage. It's like, no, they don't have to.
Clearly, you must not be doing it right.
Yeah, like couples sometimes and clients in general, not just couples, but it's like, well, I know that, in order to be a good mentally healthy person or a mentally healthy relationship, you need to do this, 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 and this, and it's like, well, no, not necessarily. Mentally healthy means, are you in a good spot with this? Like if you and I've said to couples just recently, like, hey, look, if you guys are both if you have sex once a month and you're both genuinely like, yeah, it's a good frequency, then I think, great. That's all that matters. There's nothing that says you need to have it 3 times a week or anything like that in order to be happy. It just matters that you guys line up. But we get so used to like, no, it has to be this way. And this, I rant about different forms of economic systems, that like in America, we're like, capitalism is the best way. Even though we find out the whole trickle down economics thing didn't actually work. But like, but the idea of like socialism or communism, it's like, no, it's like, well, hold on a second. Actually, that's just a different way of doing this economic plan. And if everyone's on board, it can work really well. Now, the problem with communism, of course, is the whole totalitarianism where somebody takes over and it turns into you get no choice. But that's a whole different story because it's slightly different than the economic proposal. But that's because someone took that thing that's like, it's fine, and then they tweaked the crap out of it and ran away with it. But I think it is I think the reason why I thought about this episode when I was talking with Becky about, and she's like, that'd be kind of interesting to look at, is to wonder how many places can you look and see, I think I have a blind spot here. Like, even if I said, like what you're saying, Mike, like I can appreciate a lot of things about country music. I don't prefer to listen to it. I've got a couple friends who are in bands and they'll send me their album. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I like the musical stuff you did here or this, but I'm not going to play your stuff on repeat. It's not my jam. Like, and that's fine. But I would love to come see you live. Yeah. Because I like watching you do your thing, but it's not my thing. But somehow that breaks down. I think just because it is like we become so used to something that it's like, it has to be this way or I can never feel comfortable again. And I actually think the nature of being married or in a relationship is I have to push myself into allowing myself to become something different. Like my wife and I were talking about this the other day because growing up, I think I had the exact same thing for Christmas breakfast for 25 years. I think we've always had sausage, egg casserole or whatever.
Yeah, ironically, I still have it for Christmas breakfast.
And cinnamon twists, or sour cream twists. Sometimes people call them, but then I married Becky and it was like, I was like, what does your family do on Christmas Eve? And it was like, I don't know. Sometimes gumbo, sometimes we do this. I'm like, what? Gumbo? Because in our house, it was like Thanksgiving dinner number 2.
2.0.
And it was like, well, and now we don't do any of that stuff. And I started being like, well, wait, what do I actually want to eat? And suddenly it's like, hey, I'm okay with whatever. That part doesn't matter to me. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be something different. And so I think it's valuable to look and say, hey, maybe that's a blind spot I have, that this is the only way to do this, instead of seeing that maybe what you're doing is valuable and I can come your direction even just a little bit. And I think there's tons of things. Like I watch these things with, considering myself an independent, having had the election results come up in multiple sessions, and listening to Democrats now saying that the election was rigged, but saying it in a different way. And they're basically saying, but mine's backed by science. It's like, you're just saying the same thing as this other person, just in a different way. But they don't see it that way, because no, this is clearly this way. Instead of saying, hey, look, even like, because some people have been really upset. Some of my clients really upset. I think we mentioned this last week, Mike, but like, all hope is lost. We're all going to die. Trump's president. And it's like, there may actually be some benefit to this thing going this way. Like, could you see some benefit? It's like me. It's like, hey, look, it's music. I can appreciate how good that guy is at guitar, or how smooth Willie Nelson's voice is, instead of going, well, I'm going to die because I'm stuck in this country bar and I want to kill myself. And again, why is that such a passionate response?
Well, it's, like I've been thinking, I wouldn't have thought to call it blind spots, but I think certainly that's right. What I've been kind of looking at in myself for the last few months. I mean, it's taken more of a backseat in the last couple of months, but the few months before that I was trying to be less decisive or definitive when giving an opinion.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like, what was your little
on that?
Your little joke to start the session, Rob?
Something about my way's right and you're wrong, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think there were times where it certainly felt to me like I would make a statement and I would watch someone's reaction, and I thought, oh, they just felt completely judged because of how decisively I made my statement.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've pretty effectively shut down any conversation in this area now. And so if I'm curious about their way of thinking, I'm going to have to work pretty hard to get them back to a place where they're willing to share it, because my decisiveness was so off-putting to them that they just, right? Like, and so in essence, I was creating my own blind spots by giving off this perception of, no, the way I think is right and anything else is stupid, so don't even talk to me about it. So now they're not going to talk to me about it, and I've lost the opportunity to learn something I didn't know before. And so I kind of put a focus onto how can I deliver, right? How can I say, yeah, country's not my thing, while still respecting the fact that like you love it and it connects to you on so many different levels. And that's great for you. Like, I want to understand what that's like for you. I don't think it'll ever be like that for me. It doesn't matter how much I listen to it. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Right. But
no, because it's steaming turd.
It may not ever be that for me. I could listen to it a whole bunch, whatever. But I want to understand how it's that for someone else.
Yeah. That's what I think is so valuable in seeing blind spots, is saying, like, that's really valuable what you're describing, Mike, to say, like, sometimes I'll say to couples when he or she says something like, could you hear the truth in what they're saying? It's not 100% true, but maybe some of what they said is like, oh, I do that. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of value in just being able to say, okay, what are the things that I don't know that I'm doing? Now, sometimes it is the way you can see those things is by paying attention to, how do people respond to this, or this? Like, maybe I notice that when I talk, people shut down, or, or I've had some things recently where I'm like, oh, clearly I like to hear my own voice too much, because I probably should have cut that short, and people, I'm just overlooking when someone's eyes are glazing over, like, no, you'll like this. Hold on, let me keep going. Instead of being like, well, how about I make my message more concise? Like, maybe I'm not that important. I think
What?
that's pretty valuable to be able to, like, I think after my ranting on women last time, which it wasn't really that ranting on women, but I think, yeah, I just kind of hope genuinely that everyone can look and say, all right, well, maybe this is just the way I've known it. And maybe I'd really like this if I tried it out. Or, like maybe there's a different way that you're offering that if I accepted it, it could feel just as meaningful to me. I thought the breakfast we had at Christmas was the only meaningful way to have Christmas breakfast until I tried this other way. I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. Turns out it's not really the food I eat that's the meaningful part. It's this stuff. And that's so it's knowing the principles that you're looking at. The blind spots are sometimes usually based on a deep connection or commitment to that principle or whatever, principle being a loose term there. And so recognizing you can meet that principle in a number of ways. It does not have to be your way. It doesn't have to be capitalism. Socialism could work really great if you get a group of people who are really committed to it. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was going to say, I do think that is part of why we're able to let simpler things like peanut butter go. But when we start moving into things that for us hold deep moral or spiritual significance, there's so much more of, like, to me, I can think of a few things where, and my spirituality would be part of this. It is so deeply a part of who I am that one, like I think, no, but I want people to understand how this feels for me. I want them to feel this thing that I feel because I love it so much. And I think, right, but I can't actually control that. But it does when it comes down to it. If someone's challenging it, because of how deeply personal it is, I am much more likely to get defensive.
Right.
And to feel like you're attacking me because this is this thing that is so intensely. We're not just talking about peanut butter now. Now we're into a whole different area, and like, well, now you're coming after me.
Right.
And it's learning how to say, no, they're not. They just see things differently. Their experience has taken them to a different place, to a different understanding. And that's okay. Like, there was a political topic that came up here in Missouri, and lots of people felt strongly about it, and they didn't like the outcome of the vote. And Jenna and I were talking about it, and I said, I've worked with a handful of people that this particular thing affects, and I said, and I still have some pretty clear ideas about right and wrong surrounding it. But having worked with these people, I thought, I see it differently though, because I've seen how it impacts, and I've seen different things, and I think I don't speak as definitively on it anymore because I think, no, I've worked with people in the aftermath of this. I know what it is. And I mean, I haven't worked with a ton, but like the experience has been remarkably similar for the ones I've worked with. And I think, yeah, I no longer can sit here and speak so definitively and decisively on it because I think, no, I've seen a different side of it now. So it hasn't changed, again, like my views of right and wrong surrounding it, but it has changed how I interact with someone who disagrees with me on it.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it play out differently.
That's what I think is valuable about seeing your blind spots is it's not that by seeing them that you're going to suddenly change your beliefs. There's a possibility, and sometimes that's great.
Sure.
But it's most likely just that you'll soften on things and be able to approach things a little more openly than you did previously. So, Spacemen, go put on your Tommy Bahama shirt and listen to Mele Keliki Maka. And then come back next time and catch us on the Manspace. Now kiss me on my hot mouth.